Welcome, Ayubowan. So in today's lesson, we are going to have a look at Cambridge Book 7, Test 3. So now this test is mainly for the academic IELTS candidates. Now before we begin discussing all the answers, I would like you to pause the video, take 1 hour and do the test. If you have done it, then straight away you can review the answers and go through the discussion. Alright, so pause the video here, take 1 hour and do all 40 questions. Alright, so I hope you would have finished all 40 questions. So let's have a look at Book 7, Test 3 answers. Alright, so I hope you would have done Test 3. Let's have a look at the answers. So this is only for the academic students, don't forget, right? I mean general students, if you want to practice, there's nothing wrong in doing it, but it just tends to be really difficult than the general paper, okay? So passage 1, here are your answers, questions number 1 to 13. Right, passage 2 answers, question number 14 to 26. Please tick. Passage 3, questions number 27 to 40. Alright. Okay, so now let's have a look at the descriptions of why these are the answers, right? So if you've got 0 to 13, unlikely you're going to get a good score. 14 to 30, some kind of acceptable score. 31 to 40, that is good, right? It means that you will get somewhere like a 7 above, which is like a good score. Right, so passage 1 and intelligence, okay? Now questions 1 to 6, we're supposed to have a look at it. Is it true, false or not given? Ants use the same channels of communication as humans do, okay? So keyword, same channels of communication, humans. Now if you have a look at the second paragraph, the writer says, ants store food, repel attackers and use chemical signals to contact one another in a case of attack. Such chemical communication can be compared to the human use of visual and auditory channels, right? This means ants use chemical signals to communicate and humans use visual and auditory channels. So ants use the same channels of communication as humans. It's false. It's not the same. They use chemical signals. Humans use auditory and visual channels. So answer is very clearly false. Second one, city life is one factor that encourages the development of intelligence. So city life encourages intelligence. In para 7, the writer states, whereas prehistoric man had no exposure to urban lifestyles, the forcing house of intelligence, the evidence suggests that ants have lived in urban settings for close on 100 million years. So this means that city life is what encourages the growth of intelligence. So it is one of the factors encouraging the development of intelligence. Therefore, answer is true. When they say the forcing house, it means factor that encourages the development of intelligence. Right, question number 3. Ants can build large cities more quickly than humans do. So large cities more quickly. Now information relating to building of ants and humans can be found in para 7 and 8, whereas the writer says, yet Holdobler, the Wilson's magnificent work of ant lovers, the ants describe a super colony of the ant Formica yesens is on the Ishikari coast, right? This megalopolis was reported to be composed of 360 million workers and 1 million queens living in 4,500 interconnected nests. So we don't know, was it quicker than the humans? We don't have any comparison. So therefore, I would say not given. Some ants can find their way by making calculations based on distance and position. Find their way, distance, position. In paragraph 10, the writer says, research conducted at Oxford, Sussex and Zurich University. It's not Zurich, it's Zurich. It's in Switzerland, right? Zurich universities actually have shown that the desert ants return from foraging trip, right? They navigate by integrating bearings and distances. So, find their way is to navigate. Position means bearing or direction. Integrate means combine two or more things together. So, in this one, they can combine bearings, which is the direction, and the distances. So, yes, it is true. Position, direction, true. Question 5. In one experiment, foraging teams were able to use their sense of smell. Experiment, foraging, smell. If you go to para 11, where the experiment is described, the writer says, elaborate precautions were taken to prevent the foraging team using odor clues. Smell. Odor means smell, okay? So, in one experiment, foraging teams were able to use their sense of smell? No. They said they prevented it. So, definitely no, false. The essay, In the Company of Ants, explores ant communication. So, keywords in the company of ants, communication. In the last para, the writer says, it's no surprise that Edward Wilson, in his essay, In the Company of Ants, advises readers who ask what to do with the ants in their kitchen to watch where you step. Be careful of little lives. The writer just states that the essay advises people to take notice of ants. There is no information whether they explore the ant communication. We don't know, so I would say not given. Alright? Okay, so question number 7 to 13. The ants cultivate, so we are supposed to complete the summary, right? The ants cultivate a large number of different species of edible fungi which convert blank into a form which they can digest. So, keywords are fungi, convert, digest. In paragraph 5, the writer says, ants can't digest the cellulose in the leaves, but some fungi can. The ants therefore cultivate these fungi in their nests, bringing them leaves to feed on, then use them as a source of food. Right? So, what do we come here with? A large number of different species edible fungi which convert what? Can't digest the cellulose. So, which converts the cellulose, right? So, answer is cellulose C. Right, 8 and 9. They use their own natural as weed killers and also use unwanted material as, right. So, keywords own natural weed killers unwanted. In the next sentence, with the one I read before, right, the writer continues, farm ants secret antibiotics to control other fungi that might act as weeds and spread waste to fertilize the crop. This means that ants secretly produce from their own bodies antibiotics to kill weeds. Therefore, most suitable words to be filled here should be secretions. Okay, so they produce their own and then kill the weed, secretions, right? Because it comes from their own bodies. Question number 10, right? So, so here you have 8, right? And then we have 9 where we're supposed to say unwanted material as, right? It can also be seen that ants use waste to fertilize their crop. So the unwanted ones are as fertilizers. Answer is F, right? Alright, 10. Genetic analysis shows they constantly upgrade these fungi by developing new species and by doing what? With the species with their neighboring ant colonies, right? Sorry, colonies, right? So keywords are upgrade, species, neighboring ant colonies. In paragraph 6, the writer states, these turned out to be highly diverse. It seems that ants are continually domesticating new species. Even more impressively, DNA analysis of the fungi suggests that the ants improve or modify the fungi by regularly swapping and sharing strains with the neighboring ant colonies, right? So what do? They exchange the species by exchanging species, right? So developing new species, right? And they also exchange, regularly swapping, okay? Some people actually call it swapping. I would say swapping, okay? Swapping and sharing. So exchanging would be the most appropriate answer. 11 to 13, okay, so we've got 11, 12 and 13 gaps there. In fact, the farming methods of ants could be said to be more advanced than human agribusiness since they use methods they do not affect the and do not waste. So farming methods affect waste. Now here we have a comparison in farming methods between ants and humans in which ants are more advanced, okay? Human agribusiness is referred to at the end of paragraph 3. The information therefore could be navigated to be in para 4 where the author notes the contrast between human agribusiness at the end of previous paras of ants. So here the farming methods of ants are at least sustainable. So we can say, right, they use sustainable methods. Because you need an adjective to describe that method, so sustainable is more appropriate. Then 12, we need a noun, something that they do not affect, right? And what do they don't affect with the environment? 13 again, we need a noun that's something that they don't waste, and that is definitely energy. Okay, so you've got N, O and E. Right, so let's have a look at questions 14 to 19. Choose the correct heading. So section A, this is a short para. When you skim and scan through the whole paragraph, it can be seen that the writer talks about the development in techniques of studying population movements by using words indicating development. Used to be based on, developed, right? So looking at it, looking back at the list of the headings, right, it can be seen that heading 4 talks about development methods. So I would take 4 developments in the methods used to study early population and movement. Okay? Section B, From the first sentence, we can infer that the paragraph is going to deal with migration to America. Recent work on the problem of when people first entered America is as an example of the value of these new techniques. Okay. Then the author continues with two questions. But was there one major wave of migration? And then when did this event or events take place? Looking back at the heading list, the most suitable heading looks like 8. Long-standing questions about prehistoric migration to America, because there were questions there, right? So I think this is the one that leads with the questions. Question number 16, section C. In the first sentence, the writer says, an important project led by biological anthropologist Robert Williams focused on the variants called a specific name, right, of one particular protein found in the fluid portion of human blood. Then in the last sentence, he concludes by saying, thus, by comparing the glymotypes, one can establish their genetic distance. Right. Okay. So it can be inferred that the paragraph deals with how variants of protein in our blood are used to explore relationships among different populations, right? So with that, I would take answer number 10, how analysis of blood variants measures the closeness of the relationship between different populations, right? So next we have section D. The first sentences the writer reports would be Williams and his colleagues sampled the blood of over 5,000 American Indians. They found that the glymotypes could be divided into two groups. Other tests showed that from this evidence it was deduced that. So when we know that with paragraph results in about Williams' project, the test carried out the evidence found from these results, I think the answer should be 1. The results of the research. Okay? Section E, question number 18. So in that, the first sentence, the writer poses a question. How far does the other research support these conclusions? Followed by the next sentence, genetics, Douglas. So it is clear that the other research is carried out by the genetists in the genetic research. So I would say 6, further genetic evidence, right? 19, section F. In the first sentence, the writer says, there are 2 other kinds of research. They involve the study of teeth and languages. Then he continues, the biological anthropologist Christy Turner is an expert in human teeth. After that, by skimming, it can be seen that the other part of the paragraph consists words relating to teeth, like, crown, root. Therefore, we know that the paragraph is about the evidence in terms of teeth. So, teeth means obviously dental evidence, number 2. It's not so difficult, right? It's a matter of just understanding by skimming and scanning. Once you do that, reading isn't as difficult as people would tell you, right? So it's a matter of just keep on doing it. Practice makes it perfect. Questions number 20, 21. Information about Williams' research is in section D, okay? The writer states, from this evidence, it was deduced that there had been 3 major waves of migration across Bering Strait. The first, Paleo-Indian wave for more than 1,500 years was ancestral to all Central and South American Indians. So only root E goes from somewhere in Asia, so I would take the answer as E. Okay? In the next sentence, the writer says the second wave, okay. So the map shows the second wave took place over 2 periods, indicated by the dotted line, okay. The first period 14,000 to 12,000 years ago, after a long time in Canada. The second period 600 to 700 years ago. These people migrated south from Canada to the USA, shown on the map by arrows, right? So I think D, this is the route from Canada to USA, so answer would be D. Next one, questions 22 to 25. Again, it is section D, which first refers to three-wave theory. Okay, so because it's a three-wave theory, right, we would go to section D. The writer states the third wave, perhaps 10,000 or 9,000 years ago, saw the migration from Northeast Asia groups ancestral to the modern Eskimo. So answer would be C. Okay. In the same para, the writer also says the second wave brought to Nadani hunters ancestors of Navajo, right? So the answer would be definitely B. Open up your reading paper and go through. If not, you will not be able to understand what I am talking about, right? So here 24 quite straightforward, right? Answer is A. 25 also answer is A, right? Next comes question number 26. Choose the correct letter A, B, C or D, right? Now keywords are Christy Turner's research examination. Now if you go to Christy Turner's research is described in section F. So we know that Christy Turner is an expert in the analysis of changing physical characteristics in human teeth. Studies carried out by Turner of many thousands of new and old world specimens, both ancient and modern, suggest the majority of prehistoric Americans are linked to Northern Asian populations by crown and root traits, right? So it goes on to talk about it, and therefore the answer is A. B and D are obviously not correct because the object studies specimens from the teeth, not humans or eating habits, okay? C is not correct because the specimens were studied not only from prehistoric Americans but also modern Americans. So that's why C is wrong. So you can see now when I give the answer, you should be able to see why are the others wrong, okay? Right, passage 3, plans to protect the forest of Europe. Right, let's have a look at questions number 27 to 33, right? So is it true, false or not given? Forest problems of Mediterranean countries are to be discussed at the next meeting of experts, okay? So keywords Mediterranean, next meeting, experts. So information about these specific countries can be seen in para 1 where the writer states, those confined to particular geographical areas such as countries bordering to the Mediterranean or Nordic countries therefore had to be discarded. However, this does not mean that in the future they will be ignored, right? So this means that the first 2 meetings of experts did not deal with the problems of the Mediterranean countries, right? But he doesn't indicate a particular time, so we don't know the time, okay? So therefore, not given. Next one, problems in Nordic countries were excluded because they are outside the European Economic Community. So keywords are Nordic, outside European Economic Community. Now when we go to para 1, the writer says, their initial task was to decide which of many forest problems of concern to Europe involved the largest number of countries and might be the subject of joint action. Those confined to particular geographical areas such as countries bordering the Mediterranean or Nordic countries, therefore had to be discarded. So problems in Nordic countries were excluded because they are outside the European Economic Community? Not really. The reason for excluding Nordic wasn't because of its economic community, it was because of the problems which were particular to that geographical area, right? So it was false. Answer is false. Okay. Right. 29. Forests are a renewable source of raw material. Renewable raw material. So in para 2 it states, at the same time, forest provides raw materials for human activities through constantly renewed production of wood. So that is true. There you go. 30. The biological functions of forests were recognized only in the 20th century. Okay, so biological 20th century. If you go to para 2, the writer argues, the economic importance of forests has been understood since the dawn of the man. The other aspects have been recognized only for a few centuries but are becoming more and more important. The other aspects, right? Here are ones mentioned in the first sentence of the paragraph, right? In which the writer refers to triple function of forests in Europe, biological and recreational as well as economic, right? So the biological functions of forests were recognized only in the 20th century. It was not only in the 20th century, recognized for few centuries. So that is false. Right, natural forests still exist in parts of Europe, natural parts. If you go to para 3, the writer says, the myth of natural forest has survived, yet there are effectively no remaining primary forests in Europe. All European forests are artificial. No, natural forests, not really. Everything is artificial. False. It says all European forests are artificial. 32. Forest policy should be limited by national boundaries. Forest policy limited national boundaries. In the next sentence of para 3, the writer argues, this means that the forest policy should not be limited by boundaries, right? So the writer argues this means that the forest policy is vital, but you should have other things involved, not limited by it. So definitely false. 33. The Strasbourg Conference decided that a forest policy must allow the possibility of change. Strasbourg forest policy allow for change. Another keyword I would say is must. It's a must that you allow for it. Okay. If you come to para 3, the writer says, this means that a forest policy is vital and it must transcend the national frontiers and generations of people. So you know that, right? The Strasbourg Conference was one of the first events on such a scale to reach this conclusion. Yes, so that is definitely true. It also states it must transcend national frontiers, allow for the inevitable changes. So that is definitely true. 34, right? Resolution. So 34 to 39, right, we are having a look at the answers. So actually 34 in paragraph 4, it discusses the resolutions made at the conference. The first proposes the extension and the systemization and the surveillance sites to monitor and decline. So it talks about it. I've put up the answers for you here. So you will understand that the answer is A, all kinds of species of trees should be preserved. So it was quite a straightforward one. That's why I'd like you to read this through, right? Then 35, which is about resolution 3, and that is in para 4. Okay. So you can see quite a straightforward answer, right? In para 4, when it states these sentences, you can see the answer is E. Okay. 37, resolution 4, again quite straightforward, answer is B, where it's a fragile mountain forest should be given priority, because it says the subject of the 4th resolution discussed by the ministers was mountain forests. It goes on. Proposed developments include a preferential research program on mountain forests. So it should be given priority. So you can understand why I'm not going in detail, because they're quite straightforward. Resolution 5 is in the 4th para, and it says relaunched the European Research Network, right, and was called in Eurosilva. So Eurosilva should support joint European research on tree diseases and their physiological and biochemical aspects. So we're looking at answer G, that resources should be allocated for tree diseases. 39 is resolution 6. So finally what it talks about, quite straightforward if you read through, answers D, that research is to be better coordinated throughout Europe, right? Establish the framework for a European research network on forest ecosystems. And our final question, the best title for passage 3. So you have to go through everything together, right? And lots of things speaking about the functions of forests, finally goes on into detail about it, how to protect it, right? So I would say B, plans to protect the forests of Europe. So with that, we have come to the end of the discussion for test 3, which was in book 7, especially for academic candidates.